Hello, Tingle Seekers. This is your friend, Tinglesaurus Rex. And this is the prelude, I suppose, to my big 10 subscriber extravaganza. I know a lot of people on YouTube and Facebook are celebrating their thousands, hundreds and thousands of fans. And I'm over here. I'm so excited that I have 10 subscribers. I'm surprised whenever I get a new subscriber. I just can't believe it. You know, it's just I can't believe anybody actually wants to listen to me. Actually, well, I guess that's not true, because that's what I do. I use my voice and people listen to it. The reason that I had planned to record a video tonight, but I'm pretty tired. I have a huge headache. I announced a roller derby bout tonight. I know it's funny to go from being Mr. Loud, boisterous announcer to Mr. Soft-spoken Tinglesaurus Rex. It's quite a contrast, but I think that's why I like it so much. Just the hope that somebody's getting tingles from the things that I say. And hopefully, once I really get things rolling from the sounds that I put together. Because I get so much from the ASMR community that I want to give it back. Give something back. That's why I started this channel. I have a couple other channels that I don't think anyone from those channels has found this channel. I don't think anybody from this channel has found those channels. I think there's one person. I know there's one person who has made the connection because I told her. One of my favorite ASM artists, Softly Sherry. Yes, I'm giving a shout out to Sherry. She's one of my favorites. She has that adorable voice. There's a very childlike quality to it, and yet it's not childish, because a lot of people, when they try to sound youthful, it ends up sounding childish and not childlike. It's very obviously, people who watch this channel probably have seen her channel, and if you haven't, definitely check it out. Softly Sherry. That's SHARRY. Another one of my favorites is Nutty McFreak. I listen to her all the time. I would say watch her videos, but most of the time when I'm tuning in to ASMR, I have my eyes closed and I'm just listening for the tingles. Very seldom do I visually trigger. I'm almost entirely an auditory. Almost all of my triggers are auditory. What are your triggers? I've always wondered that. What triggers people? I know some people are triggered by seeing things. There are some things that will trigger me by sight, but I'm typically triggered by female voices. I don't know what it is. There are certain qualities about some female voices. And I've actually found myself triggering on golf announcers sometimes. The really soft. And now, Palmer steps up to the tee. He's 2 strokes under par. Well, I guess if he's at the tee, he's not really strokes under par. I don't know. I'm not really a follower of golf, so I couldn't really. I'd have to do some studying before I could announce it, but I guess that could combine 2 things that I like to do, ASMR and announcing. I've announced quite a few things. I've announced football and basketball. Roller derby is definitely my favorite sport to announce. It's a lot of fun, but it can be hard on my voice sometimes because I don't adhere to my training and I do use my throat too much. named Rex, which is funny because my derby name is Rev. I'm revealing a lot more about myself now, so it's funny because in ASMR I'm Rex, for there I'm Rev, so like for everything else I'm Rev. There are a couple other nicknames I have too, but so it's just kind of funny for me, that I get a nickname here, I give myself a nickname here that's so close to my nickname everywhere else, and whenever I sign off on a comment or something and I put Rex, I have to watch myself because I sometimes sign off as Rev, and wait a minute, no, I'm not Rev here, I'm Rex. So it can be confusing for me at times. But my views are actually doing a lot better than I thought they would. Figured I'd get a couple curious people to begin with, and then it would just trail off to nothing. But 10 subscribers. I'm actually up to 11 subscribers, and some of the people that are subscribed are two of the people are big people in the community. Well, Softly Sherry, one of my first subscribers, she's becoming a very big part of this community. People are starting to realize how awesome she is, and I think that's awesome. If you haven't figured that out yet, you're probably dozing off from other ASM artists coming here, and hopefully I'm contributing to the sleepy drowsiness and talking you to sleep. That's one good thing about being an ASM artist. It's not a slight to say that someone put you to sleep. It's actually a good thing. But Minx Laura just subscribed to me, and I was like, wow, because everyone talks about her like she's like one of the big names. And when I got the message that she had subscribed, I was like, wow. That's as big as when Sherry subscribed to me. It was pretty huge. There are some names that if I ever see them as subscribers, I'm just going to be completely giddy. Like if, the Water Whispers Ilsa, or Heather Feather, Haley Whispering Rose, if any of those, there are a bunch more. I could keep going, but what's the point? I could sit here and just name off people that I really like, that are really big in the community. If those people subscribed, it would just be wow. And for me, it's kind of a badge of honor that Sherry subscribed to me when she was on her way up, and it's like, hey, ground floor, we were there together. I knew her when she was just starting out. But I don't know how soon I came on, but pretty early, But she's definitely making a name for herself because people are realizing how talented she is, and she's the real deal, people. If you've never listened to Sherry, you've got to listen to her. She's going to be embarrassed when she hears this. Don't talk about me. She doesn't have a New Zealand accent either. I can't do a New Zealand accent. Best I could do is Australian. That's hard to do when I'm whispering. I have to work on my accents when I'm whispering. Or softly speaking. I suppose the best I could do would be some sort of British. I've been working on my received pronunciation. It's been a while since I've worked on good accents. Most of my accents I use for comedic effect. So I use, the stereotypical Hollywood caricatures of like Russian accent. So it's not meant to be authentic. It is meant to be what people think of when they think of that accent. It's not necessarily meant to be what is accurately Russian accent. Do you understand? Now, if I had the right study materials, I could work on proper accent. Like if I had, in the old days, we used to use records. You get an accent record and a dialogue coach. or a dialect coach rather, and you would work on your accent for a part. Nowadays, I suppose you go on YouTube and just watch videos from people in certain areas. I suppose that's what I would do. Listen to them speaking their native language, then listen to them speaking in English to see the difference between. Because I like to go the extra mile. I like to see how they make sounds in their native language, because that gives me a better idea of how they would make sounds in their in another language. What's really fun is to speak a foreign language other than the language that is native to the accent you're using. So like a Russian accent speaking German is always fun. And what I've done for some parts before is an accented character taking on the affectation of a third accent. So my underlying accent, your accent is always there. You have to deal with it. You have to counter it whenever you're speaking. So, that's your base. And then you've got the second accent is the one that your imaginary base. So that's your secondary base. And then the third is, the second one is the character's base accent. So from there, the character is trying to affect the third accent. And so when you get that layering, it gets really crazy. Fortunately, or I guess unfortunately, there isn't much call for that, because people generally don't write, like an Egyptian pretending to be French. So, you don't have to layer, you don't have to start by layering an Egyptian accent on top of your own and then trying to give an impersonation, your impression of an Egyptian trying to impersonate a French accent. Because, you want it to sound like a French accent, but there have to be giveaways that it's not quite a French accent. Because you can give a French accent. I can't do it when I'm speaking softly. It's too I would have to work on it. Maybe that's something I could do, because it's the way you move your mouth, your tongue. It's not the cadence and everything. It's not something I'm used to. And I'm not. It's ASMR. I'm not going to start speaking normally just so I can affect a French accent. But of course. And actually, my French accent tends to be more Quebecois than French, which is funny because, people when I'm speaking French or using a French accent in English, people always ask me if I am Quebecois. Are you from Quebec? No. I'm American. It's just funny that I get that affectation because the French training that I've had, which is actually very limited, has been in America from people who have studied French from French people and not from French Canadians. So that I get some sort of Quebecois affectation is very funny. I don't know where it comes from, but I've had several people tell me that I sound like a French Canadian when I speak French and when I try to give an impersonation of a French person. They say, you don't sound like you're from France, you sound like you're from Canada, like you speak French Canadian, Canadian French, and not French proper French, I guess, traditional French. I don't want to say French because that just sounds funny, but you know what I mean. I'm just being silly now, I suppose. At least it's not Belgian French, because I wouldn't even know how to make the difference there. My ear is not tuned to French well enough to tell the difference between Belgian French and French from France, just because I'm not exposed to it enough. Actually, my ear's not tuned enough to tell much about French. So, I can't really tell people's where they're from based on how they speak some languages. Except Spanish, I can typically pinpoint people by the way they speak Spanish because I grew up with a Spanish-speaking parent, and I was, well, as fluent as a 5-year-old can be in any language, because I don't think anybody's even fluent in their native tongue at 5 years old. Excuse me. I think I might have to edit that out. I'll listen to it later, see how it goes. I might just end up re-recording this whole thing. I don't know. But yeah, I was I was bilingual. I try to be a polyglot, but I can understand better than I can speak in most languages. But when I got to school, having a very Spanish name, I was put with the Spanish speakers because the teacher greeted me in Spanish because I have, my first, middle, and last names are all Spanish names. And, being half Mexican in Southern California in 1979 when I was in kindergarten, it was September 1979 is when I got into kindergarten. Wow, that was a long time ago. I was greeted in Spanish, so I replied in Spanish because that's just was polite. If she had greeted me in English, I would have answered in English. If she had greeted me in some other language, I would have just looked at her funny because at that point I didn't really understand, but I knew I was conversational in Spanish, so she was greeting and speaking to me in Spanish, so I was responding to her in the language she was using. That just seemed the thing to do, so they put me with the Spanish speakers, and we were all forbidden to speak Spanish while at school because we were being immersed in English so that we could learn English, so that we could speak it better. So it was almost a week before I finally asked why I was not allowed to, why I was put with Spanish speakers and being taught English. Because I could speak English. And they kept complimenting me on my English. You speak very well. Your English is so good. And I guess, I really liked the praise because, who doesn't like praise? Wouldn't you stay with it if they're telling you how great you are? It's like, hey, you're doing really well. It's so great. Your English is so good. I suppose, it's like if you're in the Netherlands and they're saying, your Dutch is so good. But, you grew up speaking to, it's like, well, of course it is. I speak Dutch. It is our native language, isn't it? Well, I guess, the Dutch speak like 5 million languages. I had a few Dutch friends, and they were all polyglots. They spoke like 5 languages each. And the same with my friend from the Czech Republic. She spoke 3 languages. I was always jealous. I wanted to speak 5 languages. But I make up for it by speaking English very well, and by having excellent grammar in English, having a decent understanding of Spanish, being able to speak Spanish, not so well. It atrophied. I just stopped speaking it, and I wish I hadn't. But I pick up bits of language here and there, and I can kind of understand what people are saying. So I appear to be a polyglot, and I do watch foreign flicks a lot. So you watch enough movies in certain languages, you start to pick things up. So, like watching a lot of, Japanese samurai flicks, and studying Japanese for a semester before I had to drop out. I picked up some Japanese so I can, start to talk in Japanese and people are impressed. And then I don't, as long as I don't go much farther than that, people think, oh, hey, well, it's really cool. The key is just doing enough so people think that you're smart. Trick people into thinking you're smart. And, same with German, because I had friends in high school who took German, so I kind of, took German by proxy. And Italian, because Italian and Spanish are both Romance languages, having Latin in common, they're very similar. Same with Portuguese. If you slow it down and you think about it, you can get the gist of what people are saying. Plus, watching a lot of being a film major and watching a lot of the old Italian cinema really helped to get to understand Italian, because I had a hard time reading some of the subtitles because I'm a very slow reader. So I was having to understand the language by context. So, and just understanding, applying my knowledge of Latin and Spanish to Italian to understand what was being said. And, cinema is a language unto itself, and a well-made picture can convey the story very well. So the dialogue, I don't want to say it becomes inconsequential, but the movie itself, the picture, the action, helps you understand the dialogue if you can open yourself to it. But I am fascinated by language, and it's just something I love doing. So I'm thinking of trying to do some foreign language ASMR. But I might have to have my mother, which is funny because my mother is mostly Irish. She has some other European in her and some Native American. But she's red-haired, white skin, freckles. And my father was Mexican, and he was dark-skinned, dark-haired. And I ended up somewhere in the middle. So, it's funny because my mother speaks Spanish like a native, like speaking Mexican. And her accent is very Mexican. Like a norteña, like from the northern area, near the border. Toward, with the border of California, not so much like the border with Texas or the other states. And yes, there is a difference in the accents and the dialects. It's slight, but it's there. Most people might not notice, but it can be noticeable to people who speak the language and people who care about these things. But she does speak like a norteña, not like a chilanga, which would be from like Mexico City. And there are a bunch of other regions that would have different accents and dialects. And it's funny because when she speaks to people on the phone in Spanish, they're expecting Mexicana, Mexican, to show up. But then when she shows up and she looks like, she stepped out of an Irish postcard, they don't expect her to be the person that was on the phone. It's hilarious. Or when we'd go to Tijuana, because I grew up near San Diego, so Tijuana was a destination all the time, because you go there, do some shopping, get great blankets for back then it was like $10. You could get a nice wool blanket, which, that's really all you need in Southern California, because it doesn't get very cold most of the time. Here in Michigan, it's a different story. You need a lot more than that. Of course, I don't need that much, but I have a lot of insulation, if you know what I mean. Anyway, that's another story. But, so we'd go, and my mother and my tia, my aunt, would be standing or milling about the store, or standing in the back of the line, and the shopkeepers would be talking about them in Spanish, thinking they were just two güeras, two white ladies. And so my mother would come up to the register, or if they didn't have a register, just to the stand, and she would complete the transaction entirely in Spanish. And to see their faces completely blanch when they realized that my mother and my aunt both could speak Spanish was hilarious. Because they were saying things about, of course my mother had started to put on weight at that time. So, they were saying rude things about her, and my aunt, actually she was my cousin, gorgeous cousin, and bodybuilder, like fitness competition where they do sort of like gymnastic push-up type things. And I mean, she had a great body, really cute face and everything. And so they were saying all these rude things about her, like really sexist, chauvinistic type things. And so they got up to the front and they talked to them in Spanish. It was just, it's just one of those things where you never know. Plus, with some of the immigrants who had come into Mexico from Europe, there are a lot of light-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed Mexicans, because they had come in from Spain and other parts of Europe, and for a couple generations lived in Mexico. There were Lebanese and Japanese immigrants into Mexico also. That's why people laugh when I tell them that one of my father's secret ingredients in his Mexican cooking was soy sauce, because that's actually an ingredient in some Mexican recipes, because the Japanese, to escape World War II, some of them migrated to Mexico. And some of the Japanese in Southern California, to escape the concentration camps internment camps, because we didn't call them concentration camps, to escape the internment camps that we had for Japanese, because we were paranoid. Yes, America did have camps that we put people in during World War II, because we were afraid of the Japanese being agents. People who had lived here for, a couple generations, and had no reason to be feared. Innocent people were put in camps. Some of them fled to Mexico, and plus, a lot of the Japanese people who were fishermen in Japan they migrated, I guess it would be emigrated, to Mexico, where the coastal cities have a lot of fishing. So for them, they were able to carry on their livelihood in much the same way. The environment's slightly different. Well, actually, it's tropical. And they were able to continue fishing and living very much the same way that they did. And they were able to escape the specter of war, because, they were just simple fishermen. They weren't soldiers. They weren't, they just wanted to fish. They wanted to live. So they went down to Mexico, and they weren't going to come to the United States, because, that would be a very bad idea. Lebanese immigrants. That's why, I don't know how many people would know what tacos al pastor are, but it looks like, if anybody knows Greek food, what a gyro is. It's the thing that's in the pita, and it's usually lamb sometimes it's lamb with beef mixed together, and it's formed into a loaf and put on a rotating spit, but it's vertical instead of a horizontal spit, and they slice it into and it ends up looking like a cone. Well, they call it pastor because it's the Lebanese shepherds that emigrated to Mexico brought it with them. So they were typically using lamb. The Lebanese would have used lamb, but the Mexicans tend to use pork because that's just a much more readily available meat. So, you've got immigrant cuisine inspiring the native cuisine there. People here in America don't understand Mexican cuisine. They think Taco Bell, and, tacos and nachos. And, while there are tacos that are authentic Mexican, most of what people consider to be Mexican is actually Tex-Mex that was formed along both sides of the border, but generally along the border of the United States and Mexico. And it was very hazy anyway, but basically cowboy food. And it was things that were easy to make, so they're very simple recipes. That's why if you ever look at most of those things that people call Mexican food, really simple, because they had to be made very quickly and on the go, because a lot of it's chuck wagon food. So they would just cut up some meat that they had, spice it, throw it in a pan, throw in some fruit or vegetables, because peppers are a fruit. Yes, bell peppers, they're a fruit. Seeds on the inside. And they're wonderful. I don't eat the meat anymore. I gave it up. I'm going vegan. It's very difficult. Meat is in my blood, and it's hard to get out. But yeah, it's cowboy food. And it's very tasty cowboy food. And it's actually very easy to make it vegan, because a lot of the food is still very tasty without the meat. It's very different without the meat. Most, the typical fajitas, which is, it's grilled steak or chicken, some sort of meat, some sort of grilled flesh. You throw it on a flat grill or a pan, or you can even grill on an open flame, which is so good. And you pan fry, basically stir fry, bell peppers with onions and spices. I mean, how easy is that? Bang, you've got dinner. And then just roll it up in tortillas with some rice and some beans. And, the cook has made dinner in basically the time that it takes to cut the meat, to cut the onions and the peppers, and then however long it takes to heat it up and just throw it on the table. But it looks so good, and people think it's really complicated, and it's not. It's very easy to do. I know, because I've done it. I do it. That's what's making going vegan, or that's what should make going vegan very easy for me, is the fact that cooking the stuff that I like is actually very simple. And the things that I say are difficult are actually only difficult because it takes time to make them. The rice has to be prepared over time, because, you have to simmer it with some stock or broth. Take some veggie stock. The beans, it's just, you mash some beans with some vegetable oil, and then you heat them, season them, and eat them. It's very easy. I'm going to do an ASMR cooking video and show you how to make my refried beans. Refried black beans. And they're vegan. And the thing is, the traditional recipe, well, it calls for lard or oil. Both ways are traditional. And lard just being rendered animal fat. So, you could, my mother makes her refried beans. She cooks bacon, renders the bacon fat, and makes the beans. They're so good. But of course, now that I've gone vegan, we just make it with corn oil or vegetable oil, something like that. I wouldn't recommend olive oil because it's too delicate and too fruity. So it doesn't lend a very good flavor to them. You really want something like a mixed vegetable oil, or corn oil works really well. That gives it a really good flavor. Yeah, I think I've rambled way too much. This has gone on way too long. I'm over half an hour. I don't think anybody has stuck with me. But if you have stuck with me, hey, congratulations. And most importantly, thank you. I'm very grateful to all the tingle seekers. Oh, Charming ASMR. If you haven't heard of her, if you haven't checked her out, go check her out. My favorite video of hers is she does a weather report for Tingle City. No, Tingle Town? I think hers is Tingle Town, mine is Tingle City. Yeah, because hers is Tingle Town, mine is Tingle City. I always say people sent me on the express train to Tingle City. Because, as soon as, my tingling doesn't tend to build or crescendo, it's basically bang, I tingle. So it's an express train. And she came on, and as soon as she started speaking, I just felt it right there in the back of the neck. Oh, it was wonderful. It was seriously guys, Charming ASMR. I'll put a link down in the bottom to Sherry, Nutty McFreak, and Charming ASMR. Because Sherry is getting more popular. I'm not sure how popular Nutty's getting. She's awesome, has a wonderful voice too, and Charming is awesome. These three ladies, I think that they should be at the top with these other ASMR artists because they're just as good, and you should check them out. And the next video or audio that I do, I'll mention some more because another person that I like, Tony Bomboni, I think he needs his own audio or video because this guy, it's just not just what he does as an ASMR artist, but him as a person, he's just wonderful. The guy is amazing. And so, yeah, I think I need to talk about him just completely separately and give him his own 30 minutes because I think the guy's wonderful. And I don't think I could tell him enough how wonderful he is. Plus, I don't think he realizes who I am on Facebook versus here. I don't think he even knows that I exist here. He knows I exist here, but I don't think he's made the connection between who I am on Facebook and the channel that I have on YouTube. Because we have good interactions on Facebook and good interactions, limited interactions on YouTube, and I don't think he's seen my channel. So, I don't know. Maybe he saw it and didn't like it. Who knows? We'll find out. Thanks for tuning in, Tingle Seekers.